Welcome everybody to the JeffMara podcast. Today we have a very special guest and her name is Dr. Ingrid Honkala. She is a marine biologist, oceanographer, NASA and Navy scientist, international lecturer, and childhood near-death and spiritual transformative experiencer. She is the author of the book, A Brightly Guided Life. Dr. Honkala, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jeff, for having me here. It's an honor. Thanks for inviting me to your show.
The honor is all mine. My audience is really into near-death experiences. And if you don't mind, let's start on the day of yours.
Yeah, that's great. Then, oh gosh, yeah, that was pretty much this experience. I would just say pretty much changed the rest of my life, although I was so little, but that's what it did. I was close to 3 years old, and back then both my parents worked and they would leave us at the care of a maid, and at the time it was part of the culture for the maid to live in the house with the family. And she was a lady that really didn't pay much attention to us when my parents were not around. So early one morning, my parents left for work and she went to her room to listen to soap operas and didn't even pay attention to us. And my oldest sister, who was close to 4 years old, and I just realized no one is watching. Let's go play in the patio. We live in a house that at the back of the house, there was a patio with a tank. This was a big tank to collect water. And the purpose of collecting water in this tank was for hand washing clothes. At the time, we didn't have a washing machine. And so next to the tank, there was a flat surface for scrubbing. And this tank held about 900 gallons of frigid water, actually.
Yeah. Was this tank above ground, like an above ground pool, or underground?
No, it was above ground. Okay. So yeah, it was a big tank. So my sister and I look at the tank. The reason I mentioned this tank is because that's where the accident happened. We look at the tank and we're like, oh, and we found a ball. Let's play cash across the tank. And this is the other thing. People think that because I come from Colombia, I come from hot weather country, but I was born in Bogota, which is high up in the Andes. So the temperature up there that early in the morning, I would say was about 30, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So the water in this tank was pretty cold.
Yeah.
So that was the thing. We supposed not to be playing in this patio and in this tank, of course, but no one is watching. What can happen? You're being so young, you're only having fun. So we grabbed a couple of stools and we climbed the tank because it was pretty high. So she sat on the flat surface, my sister, so she was a little bit safer. And I went to the other side of the tank where there was a thin edge. And I bended my knees and I was leaning very precariously in this tank, but I was just waiting for my sister to drop the ball and to throw the ball at me. So she did, but she didn't apply enough force. And then the ball fell on the surface of the tank. It was floating there and I leaned forward thinking I could grab it. And the moment I touched the ball, it rolled on the surface of the water and I lost my balance. And it's when I just fell into the tank.
Wow.
And yeah, that moment I mentioned the cold water because imagine that sense of like, it's when I felt the first thing was the shock of the water being so cold. And then the second thing was like, now I was in the water and the realization, I cannot breathe. Jeff, I never had been in a pool. We didn't have a bathtub. So I never had my head underwater.
Wow.
I didn't know that if you fall into water, you drown.
Right. How deep is the tank?
So, oh God, I would just say cannot remember, Jeff, but I had to be about, oh my God, maybe 5 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, but for a little child,
Yes.
pretty deep.
Yes.
So and not knowing how to swim.
Yeah.
So I fell in this tank and I sank. And I didn't have idea. It was the fear, the absolute horror at that moment. I don't know why I cannot breathe. I think this is what, even when little babies falling and drown into a bathtub, which could be just right there, but it's just, you don't know what is happening. You're lost in the idea why I cannot breathe. And then I remember trying, when I sank, I remember trying to push up, but it was just this terror. What am I going to do? I cannot breathe. And then when I was in this absolute sense of terror, horror, Jeff, I just in just a blink like that, I went from this state of complete horror to one of absolute peace. It was like, I didn't know what happened, but I was now like in complete state of calmness. I didn't need to fight anymore. I didn't have to breathe anymore. All the fear was gone. And I always like to put the contrast that I experienced the moment I drowned, because people also ask me, like, how can you remember, you were so young? But I say one thing, the trauma of drowning was pretty huge, and just the contrast I experienced. This tank was very dark space because it was entirely made of cement. It had a roof, and it was very early in the morning, so it wasn't like the sunlight was too bright at that moment. And when I am under the water, all I could see was the darkness of the space. And the moment I passed from horror to joy, there was a light that came from below. And this light was like the light of a candle. And it was soft, but it was able to illuminate the whole watery surrounding. And I am like, oh, there's light. The other contrast was that before I went to the state of peace, I was when I was drowning, I was in such a state of anxiety that I could hear my heart like pounding in my chest. Like I could hear it in my head like a drum. Boom, boom, boom. And it's when it turned into silence. Absolute silence. And it's when I call the silence behind the silence. And for the rest of my life, Jeff, I crave that silence because it's nothing I have ever experienced. You can even turn all the noise in a house, in a room, but there's always some noise. This was the state of complete silence.
Interesting.
And then, that's why I call it the silence behind the silence. And I knew I was that peace. I was that silence. I was that stillness. So when I am in this state of absolute well-being, I started to see bubbles that were floating in the water. And the bubbles were surrounded by light. And it was by looking at these bubbles, and I started to chase the bubbles, that I turned around, and it's when I saw a body suspended in the water. And I look at that body, Jeff, and it was incredible because at that moment I knew that was my body. And then this is amazing because it was that sense of like, oh, this is familiar to me. Like this is not the first time, and I just had this sense of being an eternal being. And that was not the first time in the eternal, my eternal being, that I had to change to say costumes or clothing. That this already happened before in my existence. So it wasn't new to me. So I wasn't even surprised. It was like, oh. And then there was another incredible thing that is another contrast that I experienced, and I always like to mention, and is that I was born as a very sick child. Mm-hmm. And I spent the first 3 years of my life completely unwell. I didn't even know, Jeff, what was to feel well, because my life I was always sick. And imagine now I am experiencing the state of absolute, complete well-being. So what do you think I thought when I saw that body? I'm like, why do I want to go back to that?
Yeah.
I'm feeling free. I'm feeling well. I'm feeling peaceful, joyful. I'm having fun. So when I look at the body, I'm like, oh no, I'm not going back there. And I turned around and I left the body behind. And at that moment, I started to see flowers that were blooming from nowhere. And these flowers were like appearing, and it was like the sense of dimension also disappeared, because now I was picked by the flowers. So I don't know how big the flowers were, but now I am being picked by the flowers. And the flowers started to carry me. And I put the analogy, it was the sense of going back to the womb, where you don't have to do anything. You're just being done. So I'm like, oh, this feels so good. And I'm just enjoying in this ride and having fun. When this is what is incredible about this experience, is the part of the validation of it. And is that what happened there, Jeff, in just a blink like that, I appeared in the maid's room. And she was lying on her bed, and I'm looking at her from above, like I'm floating on in the ceiling, and I just look at her and I'm like, oh, that's Maria. And I can remember this so clearly, and it's so vivid and so real in my head that I can even remember the soap opera she was listening in the radio. And she was completely unaware of what was happening to me. So from there, again, in just a flash like that, I appeared in my mom's path. My mom was walking. She was on her way to work. She didn't have a car, and she had to walk few blocks to get to her bus stop. And now I am above her, like with the maid, and I'm like, oh, the moment I said, oh, that's mom, my mom stopped. She did not even give another step. She stopped, and she knew that something was happening at home with one of her daughters. And my mom was a very intuitive woman, Jeff. The thing I said to people is not just about being intuitive, but listening to that intuition. And she was like that. She always listened, and she stopped. And it's when she turned around and she started to run back home. And at that moment, I looked at her and I'm like, she's running. But then I got distracted by the realization that wherever I put my mind, I could go. So imagine, Jeff, having this childlike mind. I started to just play a game of going places. And I saw a dog. I love animals. There was a dog at the end of the street, and poop, I was there. I saw a park, the trees, whoop, I was there. And I'm like, oh, now I'm just having fun and playing the game of going places. And while I'm playing this game is when, again, in just like a blink, like a flash, I appear in a realm. And this realm was made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. And it was the first time in the 3 years of my life, nearly 3, that I felt for the first time, I am home. Oh, it was the sense like, I am back home. And it was like, again, the familiarity, the sense of like, not even 3 years had passed. It was the sense of like, if that morning I left to go to school, and now I am back in the afternoon home, not even 3 years. There was not all that sense of timing was completely different. Like we could just say time and space as we know it vanished. It was completely different. And then I didn't see or really hear anybody, but it was the sense of being welcome. Like when you arrive home and you know your family, your wife or your children are in the house somewhere. So it was the sense this is home, and feeling that the house was full. And it's when I started to have this knowing, although I saw my body suspended in the water, until that moment, I did not have the realization that I was not that person, that I was not Ingrid, that I was not that body. And it's when I realized myself, Jeff, and it was incredible. It's when, oh gosh, I am a being of light. And I started to dissolve and feel the sense that I was just becoming one. Like one with the whole. And this feeling went even farther because I started to have what I describe the sense of non-self. I experienced what I call nothingness. And when people ask me, but what is nothing? What nothingness mean? I said, the moment I tell you what is, it becomes something. So I just cannot really describe. I can tell you what is not. I can tell you that is not the concepts I knew. It's nothing that I knew. There was not the movements, the colors, the vibrations, nothing I knew. So, but when I said nothingness, people also get scared. They said, "Oh gosh, what is this nothingness thing?" And I said, "No, it's at the same time that you have this sense of this nothing, it's like it encompasses everything. It's like empty, but it's full. I guess it's empty of what you know, but full of it's the full potential. The only thing I could say is like, is the space or feeling the state of absolute and pure consciousness and presence. So when I am in this state, absolute joy, what we describe as love cannot even compare with what I was experiencing there. Is just totality. And then I am in this state of joy when my mom finally arrived home. And although we live in a big house, this is the other thing, Jeff, she knew exactly where to go. Because if she stops in other rooms, I would have definitely drowned. The body can only hold so long. And my mom went to the back of the house, and my sister was still there in the flat surface of the tank. She was leaning almost like into the tank trying to get me out, but she couldn't reach me. And it's when she looked at my mom and she said, "Mom, Ingrid is there and I cannot get her." And then my mom jumped into the tank. She got me out. And back then she was a teacher. She worked with children. And she had been trained to do CPR. She knew how to do CPR. So this is another thing. This is incredible how life prepares us for what we need, because incredibly, she knew what to do. She got me out of the water. She said that I was like a raggedy doll. There was no pulse. My lips were blue. I was completely pale. And she started to do all she knew to revive me. But Jeff, at that point, I was so far gone, I didn't feel anything she was doing to this body. But like everything in this experience, and in just a blink, I felt that I was jumping from the tallest building in the world. And there's nothing I could do to stop this. And it was pretty much the sense of like, no. And I just didn't want to feel this. I didn't want to be back. And it was the sense that I was being vacuumed, that I was being pulled. And then I was back. And I knew I was back because all the feelings of discomfort and pain and coldness and the lack of freedom, all this was bad. And oh God, Jeff, I was not happy. I was not happy. I didn't want to be back. I didn't want to be here. And after that, life was very hard for a while for me and my parents, because I was angry to be back. And after that, I would just go, Jeff, and I would look at myself in the mirror after all this happened later, and I would just cry. And I said, this is not me. This is not my name. I don't want to be here. I should not be here. And what happened, Jeff, is that I came back with an awareness I didn't have before. When I look at my parents, I'll be like, these are not just my parents. With the sense, they're not just my biological parents. I had experienced oneness. So to me, it was the sense that they were my equals. The other thing I experienced is the knowing that I'm not just this child. And I would look at my body and I'm like, I'm not this child. So I never had the sense that I was a child anymore. The other thing is that I came with abilities I didn't have before. So not like few, I would just say not long after. I cannot tell you how many days or nothing, but it was not long after my near-death experience, I could read and write. I was just about to be 3. Imagine this. I could resolve mathematical problems. I could put together complex puzzles. So this just started to develop. Like I had, and the language, I had a very rich language. It was amazing. Everybody was in this state of, oh, what is going on with this girl? But then the hard thing happened because I couldn't relate with other children. I would look at people around and I would look at children and say, what is happening with that people? They don't know anything. So things became really hard for me. I became very angry, very aggressive. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to be here. I got even sicker than before, of course, with the accident, with everything. And then, yeah, my parents were having trouble trying to deal with this girl. They didn't understand. At the time, there was not any understanding about this, about what was happening. But that's when the incredible thing, the other miracle happened. I mean, the fact that I am alive is a miracle already. But it's when I said that the help that we need come to us in ways we don't even imagine sometimes. And for me, it happened in that I started to see what I call beings of light. So what happened, Jeff, after my near-death experience, I always say that it's like the door never closed for me. And then right after, I started to have what we know today as out-of-body experiences. So that's why also when people ask me, how come I didn't, how can I remember this? How did I didn't forget? I said, because for me, it wasn't just that experience. It just never ended. So after my near-death, I kept having out-of-body experiences, and I would just go to the realm of the light. And I would go through all these changes in colors, movements, like frequencies, and I would just be back there in this realm of the light. So, and it felt good. So I wanted to sleep. I wanted to sleep a lot. And then in one of these journeys, one day I was surrounded by starlight figures. And they were shining in all different colors. And in another one of these journeys is when one of these lights, they were shining in like, oh gosh, they was gold, silver, blue, purple. It was amazing. And in one of these journeys, one of these lights shining in like gold, pure gold, shaped itself into a human form. Like to show me, look, we are the same. And it approached me, Jeff, and it touched me. And it's when I said, you are a being of light. And it's when, wow, that moment I snapped away. But imagine, Jeff, at that point in my life, all I wanted to do was to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
That was like, I wanted to be in that connection, in that light. But of course, it's also when we realize that balance is needed. So I could not be the girl that is left forever.
Yes.
So yeah.
I think you call these journeys, and one is, would you only do this while you were sleeping? And two, how often was this happening?
At the beginning, look how life is so amazing, Jeff. Like, of course, just to make sense of all of it, the lady that was working for us that almost let me drown, that didn't even, she got fired.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents hired another lady.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, when you're a child, if a child is sleeping, you don't have to deal with it. You let the child sleep.
Mm-hmm.
My parents kept working, this new lady working for us, but she will be happy if I was sleeping. So she will allow me to sleep many hours in the day. And I spent many hours sleeping. And it happened, I cannot tell you how often, but I knew I was pretty much, I think, more like living in that world, in that reality, than in this one.
Mm.
And I wanted to be asleep. So I was just experiencing this every time. And at the beginning, it was just when I was sleeping. But this is when I mentioned the word balance. Of course, I couldn't be sleeping forever. So now is when one day I was in the bathroom. By now, I was 4 years old. And I'm taking a shower. And I'm just, I just was enjoying the hot water, the shower. When Jeff, a huge, like intense, bright blue light appeared in the bathroom. And wow, when I saw the light, what was imagine the surprise, but at the same time, the joy of knowing, now the beings of light are here. So now it was incredible, because after that day, they started to appear everywhere. So it was when, now I didn't need to be sleeping all the time. Now they were here. And although they didn't do or say anything at the beginning, Jeff, is when I started to heal. My body started to heal, and I started to eat better. I refused to eat. I was rebellious. I was angry. I didn't want to. There was a point that I didn't even want to be touched. And I started to feel better. I started to play with my sisters, to communicate more with my parents. It was the sense of feeling well. I felt so much like the love. It was incredible. And later in my life, Jeff, is when I realized over time that what all this was teaching me was that home was not a place. I didn't have to go to the realm of the light. I didn't have to go anywhere. Home was not a place, was a state of being. So now that the beings of light were here, and I was feeling their presence, and I was feeling so great here, I started to heal. So I didn't need to be sleeping. I didn't need to be in that realm of the light. I could be here and just be in that state of joy and feeling well. And then, but there was another thing, Jeff, and is that from the time of my near-death experience, remember, I had that feeling, I am not this person, I'm not this child. So I didn't have an attachment to my persona. I didn't have an attachment to my name. So I would still throw in tantrums about things just like being called Ingrid. I didn't feel identified with the name. So there was a day when the maid was calling me to eat dinner, and the lady's like, Ingrid, and I'm like, I will get so aggravated. I'm like, don't call me like that. That's not my name. And then she came and Ingrid, we're calling you. And I look at her and I said, do not call me like that. And she said, like, so how should we call you? And what is your name? And I said, I do not need one. And that was throwing that tantrum was when the beings of light started to talk to me. That night they sent me to bed, like they had enough with my behavior. And then it's when I was crying, and it's when I heard the beings of light said, like almost like in a whisper, it's going to take time for them to understand that names are not needed in the realm of the light, like you already know. So that was the sense of like, oh, of course, I know now why I don't need a name. And it was the sense of like, I'm not crazy. And of course, later on life, I understood that, yeah, as humans, with our uniqueness, in playing our role in the human world, we need a name. We need all the things we have, and names are beautiful and all that. But at that moment was that realization, I know why I don't need a name in reality. And then is when also the beings of light said to me, it's better if you don't talk about us, because people are not going to understand. And they said, the time will come and say someday everyone will be able to see us, and you will be able to share these experiences because they will understand.
I know that one time you mentioned that one of the being of light was golden looking, but as a generality, when you started seeing them, and I'm assuming it was multiple because you're saying beings, were they around you like orbs of light, or were they human in figure and shape, or did you just see like little balls of light around you, or how would you see them?
I started to see them more like orbs of light. Yes. But because I already had the clarity that they were beings, Jeff, it was the knowing that they didn't have to look like us. They didn't have, sometimes they would shape like humans, but I didn't need it. I already knew that they were beings. And this is another thing. The communication was mostly like, it's like we would say telepathic.
Right.
And incredibly, even though I wouldn't see faces or mouths moving or anything, when they were talking, even when I was surrounded by many, I knew who was talking.
When you heard their voice, would you hear their voice as your voice and as a thought, or would you hear their voice as a different voice? And even if so, were they male and female and different in sound and pitch?
You know, this is incredible, because it's like you cannot tell if it's a male or a female voice. There's not I would just think that, like, if you are thinking, like if you're hearing it in your mind, there's not really gender. There's not, you cannot really define the voice. But I have heard voice in different ways. I have heard in the sense of telepathic communication, like I hear it clearly, but it's not, I would just say, with I could call it the outer sense and the inner sense of hearing, because sometimes I hear it like if I'm hearing it from outside. Sometimes I hear it more like it's within. So it's different ways in which I can hear. Same thing, I can smell their presence. I am like, I can smell perfume. And I said, oh, they are here. Or I can feel, I can sense the presence. So it's in all different ways that I can know that they are around. And there was, and it's in my book, I tell many stories, Jeff, how they manifested not just as orbs, but later in life, I realized that they could manifest as animals, they could manifest as people. But I lived experiences, and even though at the very moment I didn't realize that was a being of light, later I knew because of the stories, the things themselves that had happened. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a being of light.
Right.
So the stories are incredible and very miraculous. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the way you describe the way you're hearing, because even generally the way your ears work, you can hear from outside, but then you can also hear from the inside. So you're hearing both.
Yes. both, and even with images, with all of it, because it's always have had like sometimes the way the beings of light communicate with me could be like, again, images that you see with your eyes closed, but I also see visions. I started to have visions since I was 4 years old. And I would be walking in a street or somewhere, and suddenly, Jeff, I was somewhere else. And I'm seeing exactly the future as I saw it later in my life. I would be in that place, living the experience, and I would have this flash of seeing everything with absolute clarity. And later in my life, these things actually happening. So yeah, I have had this possibility to experience things and at different levels. Like what would you say, like from the outer and from the inner?
If we go back to right when the NDE first happened and you were being picked up by the flowers, did they have a smell to them?
You know, at that moment, I didn't experience the sense of a smell. I was just in the absolute state of awe, the wonder of like, wow, where these lights are coming from, and the colors were like incredible. And this is the other thing. I later in my out of body experiences, Jeff, I experienced things that I have never experienced here, like movements, changes in frequency. It's actually impossible to. How can I tell you something I have never experienced here? I just can't tell you because of contrast, because of the difference. But there's colors that I have never seen here. There's sounds I have never heard here. There's movements. It happens sometimes in very fast, like the frequency, the speed changes. And everything happens like so fast. So you could be here and then you could be there. It's incredible. So it's just like experiencing things that I have never experienced here. And this is the other thing. When I was having all these out of body experiences and I was visiting the realm of the light, and it was, like I said to you at some point, I was more there than here. There was a moment in my life where I would be like thinking that and this is what many I would just say people that think about the reality, they would think that this is what is not real. But I experienced it like that. For me, this was the dream. I would open my eyes. I would be in my state of like being in the realm of the light, visiting beings of light. And I would wake up and I said, oh, thinking that I was dreaming, that this was the dream. So that was incredible.
I haven't read your book, obviously, and you may explain this in your book, are you still having these extraordinary experiences today? Are you still having out-of-body experiences? Are you still seeing beings of light?
Yes, I do. And actually, it's been incredible because now that I have the clarity that I have, Jeff, seeing the beings of light and communicating with them have become even more profound, even more incredible, because I have the clarity and the awareness and the openness to receive their teachings. So I receive teachings constantly. I usually I am awakened at 3-4 in the morning, and I'm receiving incredible teachings, to the point I'm now writing my second book, because just the teachings that I'm receiving are so profound, so important, so meaningful. So I want to share all these with people, because it's like that. This is another thing I mentioned to you at the beginning of my talk. It's like when I said, to me, it's like I always, at the beginning, I used to say to people when I came back from my near-death experience, it's like the door never closed. And not long ago, the beings of light said to me, of course the door never closed, because there is no door.
Yeah.
There is no door. The kingdom of heaven, the realm of the light, the sun, to give an analogy, is always shining for us. We are the ones that put the door. we put the door because of conditioning, because of beliefs, because of education, because of trauma, because of whatever it is that happened in our life. We're the ones that put that door. But they show me like this analogy of a window. I can close the window and all the way, but if I even pick a little, the sun is always going to be shining there. Mm-hmm. The light of the divine, what we call source, ultimate reality, universe, God, is always shining for us. Yeah, I have that communication.
What I think is very interesting is that even though you had such a traumatic experience of drowning in the tank, you still went on to become a marine biologist, an oceanographer, and a master scuba diver. So you weren't afraid of water the rest of your life. Did the beings help you with that?
No. You know, it was the realization, Jeff, that I was beyond all this, that I was not this body, that I could not die. With my near-death experience, of course, I discovered I am eternal. I am not afraid of death. That disappeared for me. So what the near-death experience did for me, I said, I drowned, yes, but drowning brought me to see the light. Mm. So for me, water turned into, oh gosh, the miracle, the gift that brought me to go deeper, to realize I was more than this body, to realize I am eternal, to realize I cannot die. Mm. So after that, it's amazing the parallel in my life, because I wanted to know the depthness of everything. So I became a scientist. To me, everything was observation. I wanted to investigate. I wanted to learn more, go deeper. And that was one thing. Even the beings of light said to me, do not believe even with what we say. Don't believe anything, but keep an open mind. Experience, live life, and prove it for yourself. Mm-hmm. So it goes from being a belief, and it turns into a knowing. Jeff, when people ask me, do you believe this? Do you believe that? I say, I don't believe anything. I know. Mm. I know because I experienced it. I was there. I have tried. Like I said, people, if you want to know what being compassion is, be compassionate, and you will know it. It goes from being a belief to now being experiential. And that's what I've done in my life. It's like, be that light, be those gifts. So that's how, that has been amazing. So yeah, I love water. I love the depthness of everything. If I can go deeper and investigate, that's what I like to do.
Since you have such a scientific mind, have you ever considered researching the scientific reasoning for NDEs and what's happening?
I just think that the only way to really investigate and know is like everything with science. You have to go and talk to the people that have had the experiences, and that's what is happening now. There's a lot of now research institutes and people dedicated to these studies, and they been talking to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and that's the way in which you can really go get your and go deeper and realize. And yeah, there's now people using, there's neuroscientists, and there's I don't know how many investigations going around that, but up to this point, like the experience happened to me. I had actually 2 near-death experiences, Jeff. The second one happened later in my life, but like the things happened to me, I went in life more trying to understand, more than trying to understand a near-death experience, because it's just an experience like anything else. I went beyond the experience. For me, it was that don't stay in the experience. That's just one more. Go beyond it. So for me, it was like how can I find, how can I discover the nature of who I am? For me, that was more important than understanding an experience.
Mm-hmm.
To me, my life turned, since I was very little, who I am. I wanted to understand what was the nature of existence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is this that I am? And I remember there was a moment in my life, I saw a movie where a person had amnesia after an accident. And it's when I asked the beings of light, I was so shocked. I'm like, it's when I had that clarity. If someday I lose the memory of who I am because I have an accident like that person in the movie, and you forget your profession, your family members, you forget everything, including your name, then what are you? You still alive? You still exist? So there has to be more than you, than what you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I wanted to know, who I am.
Mm-hmm.
What is the nature of Ingrid? And then since I was very little and I discovered the word enlightenment, I wanted to be enlightened.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to just see what is that I was. I saw myself as a being of light. I wanted to know if that's the nature of who I was. And I remember, Jeff, there was a movie. I don't know, you remember this movie called Cocoon? When there was some extraterrestrials.
Yes, that was probably in the 80s.
In the 80s, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching this movie with my sisters. And it's when one of the extraterrestrials, I think, opened or ripped the skin and there was light. And it's when I look at this being and I said, oh, I look at my sisters and I said, that's what we are. We are beings of light.
It's interesting that you went right into extraterrestrials, because I believe some people theorize that when you're having near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, that the beings you're seeing are extraterrestrials, and extraterrestrials are just beings in other dimensions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I cannot really give an answer on that because I have not experienced it that way. I mean, I guess we could say that if you're not of this earth, then you are extraterrestrial. So
right.
any other being we will see in any other dimension can be considered extraterrestrial. But at the same time, I had experienced the presence of other dimensions. And I know that I am a multidimensional being. I have had experience that. So I know that at the same time, I am at all levels of being, from the depthness of who I am to the surface of who I am. From the depthness of being a being of light to being a spirit, to in like the physicality of being human. So we are at all levels of being. Then people experience things in different ways, and I guess it also goes related to what you know. You know, one of the things that happened with my near-death experience, I over time I asked the beings of light, Jeff, why my near-death experience happened when I was so young. And the answer was really amazing, because they said it happened when you were so young because first you were old enough to remember, but young enough not to be conditioned yet. See, so I didn't have any preconceived ideas of what to expect to see or nothing. I was a clean canvas. So when this happened, people ask me, did you see Jesus? Did you see God? Did you see? I don't know, because I didn't have those concepts. So it was very pure. It was very clean. It was like, wow, I just knew, oh, there's joy, there's peace, there's silence. Wow, I saw flowers, I saw bubbles, I saw light. It was very clean. There was not much of any concepts I really had received from the outside. So that was incredible. And later in my life, the way things presented still were so, like I said, it kept happening. And Jeff, incredibly, the first person that validated the fact that I could see things and my experiences was my mom. Because and the way things started to show as something that was really happening to me was because when I started to go to kindergarten, since the beings of light asked me not to talk about them because people were not going to understand, and I prove it. They were like, what are you talking about? This girl is dreaming. I started to draw. And you asked me how I saw the beings of light, like orbs. Like I started to draw like things that look like starlight figures, orbs, lights. And I would draw these things. I would paint beings of light everywhere. Because I was told not to talk. I had to express myself somehow. And I was painting these beings of light everywhere. And this is the other thing. I was painting auras around everything, but I didn't know other people couldn't see this. And it's when the teacher was so curious, and she came to me and she said, are these the sun and the stars? Because it was already something I was doing in every single piece of paper. And I said, no, they are my friends, the beings of light. And the teacher just kind of like, they already thought I was kind of awkward because I was different from the other children.
Right.
So she's like, oh, we better call your parents. She thought I was having imaginary friends. So they called my parents. My mom came and she showed all the drawings to my mom. And it's when my mom she was like talking to the teacher, but she's quiet. And it's when I turned to her and I wanted somebody to believe me, Jeff. Imagine, I went to her and I'm like, Mom, those are the colors that we wear, and these are my friends, the beings of light. And my mom looked at me with that face, like the eyes, like the killing eyes, like don't say a word, like shh. And I'm like, I went quiet and I was so sad. And in our way back home is when my mom confessed to me that she also could see things that nobody could see. And I said, what do you mean, Mom? And it's when she confessed that she could see what we call spirits. And it's when I was so amazed. And I'm like, but it's when she said to me again, I had to learn to be quiet because nobody believed me. She was raised as Catholic. It was not for her allowed to talk about this. And if she would talk about things like that, she would be punished when she was little. So she learned to be quiet. And she said that people will be afraid if I talk about these things. So I understood at that moment, but it was when I realized, oh gosh, my mom, she can also see things. And later on, Jeff, when I was 6 years old, I started to see spirits. And I didn't know that the spirits and the beings of light were different. It's when I realized it. And it's when I went to my mom and I said, Mom, I was petrified in fear when I saw the first spirit. Like I couldn't even move, talk. I was petrified. I was like, and then I went, when all the event happened, I went to my mom. It's all written in my book. If anybody wants to know the story. But I went there and I told my mom, no, the beings of light and the spirits are not the same. And it's when my mom wanted them to know more because she thought we were seeing the same thing. And I said, explain. And my mom said, wow. She started to almost cry. And she said, I think you're seeing angels. And of course, I knew the religion by then. Now I was 6 years old, the books and stuff. And I said, no, Mom, they cannot be angels because they don't have wings. And it's when my mom, all she knew was the religion. So she's like, they have to be your guardian angels. And it's when I went and I asked the beings of light. I've been talking to them already for a couple of years. And I asked them and I said, first, the question was like, what are we with those spirits? Because they cause me fear. So I call them dark spirits because I didn't understand. And I thought the answer was going to be, yeah, we're different or something. And it's when they say, no, Ingrid, this thing that you call spirits, you, us, in essence, we're all the same. The difference between all of us is the awareness you have about who you truly are. Oh, so it's going back to that analogy of the window, is depending how open you have your window, how much you really know about your true essence. That's what makes the difference, because that would make us, what is vibrational frequency? Is just removing the blockages and realizing I am that light. It's taking away from you all the shades and realizing, oh, I am that light. So that was the answer they gave me at that moment. And I understood why I feared them. It was just because I felt them different. I have been used to feel the vibration of the beings of light that was very high. So of course, when I encountered a different kind of being, I was shocked. I couldn't understand. And there was the other question. I asked them, my mom said that you are angels. Is that what you are? And this was beautiful, Jeff, because they said to me, you can call us whatever you want. Like, we are what you want us to be. And that was amazing, because it's when I realized how compassionate the universe is. It's going to present to us in the way we can understand it. And this answered also part of that question. When people say, I saw extraterrestrials, I saw this, I saw Jesus, or I saw Buddha, whatever, it just presents to us in the way we feel the most peaceful, in the way we can understand, and in the way we can process it. For me, the understanding comes in the way this is an alien, then okay, I take it that way, and I go to my past to investigate that. See, so this is incredible. It's how giving the universe is for all of us. It's all a manifestation of consciousness, and depending on the glasses we're wearing is the way we're going to see it and perceive it. So that's why we cannot stay in the experience, Jeff. We have to go deeper. We have to go beyond the experience.
Do you feel then that spirits are conscious beings then out of their body that just haven't made the realization that they're energy? Is that how would you describe them?
Yes. Yes, because that's what I've learned, and what I have learned all these years, and with opening more all these doors and communication with the spirits, with beings of light, with knowing the afterlife, is the fact that you take this body out, the fact that we call it die, the fact that our biological body, or we just take this costume out, doesn't mean that you awaken. Doesn't mean that you already know who you are, because it's the mind. When you die, you take your mind with you, and then if you haven't done the process, or you haven't yet realized who you are, awakened to your true nature, your path of awakening is going to continue. So there's all these beings that, although they don't have a body anymore, they still having a keen interest in the matters of this world. They still identify, they still attach. So they haven't abandoned the idea of I am this persona, or I am this body. Their identity is still attached to here. So yeah, those are beings that yet have not realized who they are.
So you mentioned that you're getting teachings now, I'm assuming in your dreams, or they're waking you up in the middle of the night and giving you teachings. What is the most profound lesson that you've learned so far? Something that just blew you away,
Jeff,
that you continue to think about even today.
Okay, it's hard to tell, because there's so many. Sometimes I cannot even know which one is more profound, because they are different too, because they touch different places of who we are. But there was one time, for example, and that's when is when we just go to just deepening and deepening more. There was a moment where I said, I remember when the beings of light, I was thinking about oneness. And it's when they said to me, oneness starts within yourself. And then there was this moment when I started to think about that. And I was thinking, how do I know and unravel the mysteries of the universe? I was asking this question. And I was awakened in the middle of the night, and I saw this being of light, a different being that I've never seen before. And it was shining all different colors, Jeff. And it had eyes everywhere. Even like I knew there was eyes that could see within and out. So it was a being that could see everything. And the being said to me, to know and unravel the mysteries he said, to understand, for you to understand and unravel the mysteries of the universe, know thyself. Know thyself. And that was one of the moments when I had the clarity. I was already in the path of going within, but now I know I have that teaching about oneness. Oneness starts within myself. I have to become an observer of myself. I have to go to that place where I am put together in one piece. Because if today I ask you, like, Jeff, you want to go to the movies, for example, you want to go eat, whatever, we always say, a part of me wants to go, a part of me doesn't want to go. So which part is what? We're broken apart. We're broken apart in pieces, Jeff, because of trauma, because of beliefs, because of conditioning. We don't even know who we are. And it's the place where we have to go back and put ourselves together. So this is the kind of teachings I am receiving, and just really incredible teaching I received not long ago was about gratitude. The beings of light said to me, you don't imagine how grateful every human being would be if you realize that for you to exist, trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of subatomic particles have to be in agreement. They said to me, Ingrid, you are a divine intention. Imagine a teaching like that, Jeff. I mean, like, it blows your mind. I'm like, wow. And now they're showing me not just the nature of humans, they're showing me everything. And you say, imagine a glass of water. Wow. Is that divine intention for me to drink that water? Wow. This pen to write everything. So you start appreciating everything. That's what love is, Jeff. Is being able to recognize the divinity in everything. That divine intention that makes us who we are. And that every time I'm looking at you, I'm looking at a glass of water, an animal, a tree, the sky. Wow. I see miracles everywhere. So those are the kinds of teachings I am receiving all the time. Things, yeah.
You mentioned that you are writing these teachings down in a book. Are you working on any other projects right now that you'd like people to know about?
I am, working in actually writing 2 books. There's a lot of teachings I am receiving, and I am also working in creating like a community, because I get many emails, Jeff. There's so many people, and I would like to just connect with everyone, but it just turns to a point that is impossible to try to answer to everybody. So I've been talking to a few people to try to create just a community where we can share, where I could just probably twice a month or something answer questions and give teachings and I am planning all these and thinking about all these. something I do is I do sessions, because people is the feeling, can we talk with you? So I started to do sessions, and so this is great. But that's the other thing, I want to know what is happening with everybody after like a session, because it's so incredible to know people and to connect. And then I think this community will give us the opportunity to always keep connected. So that's one thing I'm working with now, and I'm starting to work with ideas with friends and other people to create workshops and more speaking engagements and interviews, and just sharing. What I want to do is Jeff, this is the other thing. There was a moment in my life when I had the absolute clarity that all I wanted to do was to serve. And it was the question when it came. To serve who? And of course, I had it clear. People call it whatever they want, source, the creator, God, to serve the light. And that's what I do every day of my life. I wake up in the morning, and the first thought I have in my face, in my head, in my thoughts is like, God, how can I serve you today? What can I do today? Help me be that empty basket, free of judgment, free of any concept, and just help me be that vehicle that just can bring some clarity to someone, help anybody in any way I can. And that's what I am doing. That's what inspires me today. I just want to serve.
No, that's great. All right, so to remind everybody, Ingrid's book is called A Brightly Guided Life: How a Scientist Learned to Hear Her Inner Wisdom. And I'm assuming you can find that on Amazon, right?
Yes.
Amazon and any other places, or would you just get it at
Barnes and Nobles?
Oh, you can get it at the bookstores too. It's in a book that you can buy at the bookstore.
Online.
Online. And there's probably a Kindle version maybe as well.
Yeah, I have the electronic version, the paper, and I also created the audiobook.
Oh, cool.
So there's the audio version, and I did it myself. So I am proud of it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. So you had mentioned that you are trying to connect with people, or you may do something. Is there a way for people to connect with you now? Like, do you have a website or a Facebook page?
Yes, I do. I have a website. It's ingridhonkala.com.
Okay.
And I am on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And I have a YouTube channel. And in my YouTube channel, I am trying to share these teachings, the teachings from the beings of light. So I just have little and just teachings that I receive, and also meditations. That's the other thing. People ask me, how can I connect with beings of light? That's a question I get all the time, because they say this is something that only you can do. And I said, no, the beings of light are here for everybody. The only thing you have to do the work, though. You have to quiet your mind. You have to learn to quiet your mind. How can you hear or send if you are in the noise of the head? Like I said to you, it's not the silence of the room, it's the silence of the mind. So when we learn to quiet the mind, we can listen, we can hear. So that's another thing. I'm helping people creating meditations. I don't have too many there, but I have few. So, and they're very short guided meditations where I use the elements, I use the birds, I use nature to help people to quiet the mind, to reprogram our subconscious mind, and just go back to that place where we can use our senses and nature just to be calm. I talk about walking meditation. I teach people to use all these tools to go back to the place of awareness and calming the mind. And that's the way to connect.
Yeah, that's great. All right, Ingrid, before we wrap it up, do you have one last message that you can leave the audience with?
I just want to say to people that how important is what I was just mentioning, to learn to quiet the mind. Like one of the teachings of the beings of light before we go is, they said, Ingrid, people are not really using the gift of thinking the way meant to be given. They asked me one time, Ingrid, you think that you're thinking? And I said, of course, all the time. And they said, no, people are not really thinking. They are remembering. People are usually trapped in their own memories and just live their life living the same. They say when you're really using the gift of thinking is when you learn to quiet your mind. And when you quiet your mind, you connect not just with what we call the beings of light, the world of all this knowing that is inside there, but with the inner. Now you can reconnect with your inner wisdom, with the wisdom of the universe. They said to me, when you quiet your mind, the true thinking is when you're connected with the creative thinking of the universe. And that's when you become more creative. That's when you become more intelligent. That's when you really know what to do. That's when wisdom is part of your life. And it brings you to make the right decisions, to be more efficient, to just even more kind. Because when you have peace, kindness is part of your life. Intelligence, wisdom, connection. So that's the message I'm giving now. Learn to really use the gift of thinking by quieting your mind.
That was great. Thank you. All right, Ingrid.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate you giving me some time today. I wish you the best. I wish you massive success with your books and everything else that you're involved with.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Same thing for you. You're doing this is amazing.
Thank you.
Keep shining your light.
Thank you. All right, Ingrid, have a great evening.
You too. Thank you, Jeff.
Bye-bye.